we go to sleep and our comfort, our new security blanket is our phone that we're reading all kinds of news on before we go to sleep. It's another form of running from the war. And again, with great compassion, all we're trying to do in those spaces is comfort ourselves. We are trying to self-soothe.
Welcome to the From Within podcast with Ben Osterveld.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the podcast From Within. We have a really, really cool guest, Sheryl Netzky. She is a lady that I kind of reached out to a guy that had been helped by Sheryl. This guy was more of a kind of a sarcastic, tough kind of guy. And I was surprised that he would lean into someone like Sheryl, and he was actually surprised that as well. He wasn't into healing and psychology and energy work and all this stuff. And that's the kind of guy I was interested in hearing from about how this helped. Because there's a lot of people out there that say, are into energy and into different things. But this guy was absolutely had a transformation dealing with Sheryl. And a little bit about Sheryl is Sheryl, for over a decade, Sheryl has shared her gifts with companies, organizations around the world, including energy sessions for leaders on Richard Branson's Nectar Island, team retreats in Europe for tech companies, visioning exercises for the Gates Foundation. She has helped countless leaders in dozens of industries, tons of people, even the sole entrepreneurs, the single guy, to hundreds of employees. Through her work, Sheryl has developed a keen understanding of human condition and has an incredible ability to help others see what has previously been hidden or overlooked. Sheryl supports a very real transformation. Sheryl is a rare combination of business consultant, executive coach, meditation teacher, and holistic energy healer. My kind of person. Totally weird having business and energy healing and all that together, but I think this is exactly where the world needs to go. And Sheryl helps CEOs, their teams, their families reconnect to themselves, connect to themselves, and create a connection with even yourself. Sheryl, thank you so much for being on the show. Truly privileged to have you on. I feel lucky, and I feel like I'm excited to see where our conversation goes. So thank you so much for being on the show.
It's my pleasure, Ben. Yeah, grateful to be here and grateful to be in rapport and beginning to get to know your listeners and to deepen our friendship.
Yeah, exactly. And I got to say, before the show when we chatted, Sheryl, the consciousness that you put in to giving to these people, it's one of the first people that I sat with beforehand, and Sheryl was asking me like she even prepped through meditation and really try to connect to the audience. It just shows the absolute purity of the giver, because some people come in and they want to build an audience, they want to get exposure, and yeah, that's cool. I'm totally good with that. But there's something about really connecting to who is listening. And I got to tell you, Sheryl spent the last 5 minutes talking to me about the listener and the people out there. And that was just something that I just wanted to kind of name and show that this is pure. This is not some strategy. This is about helping people. This is truly about getting people connected.
Yeah. Is it okay, Ben, if I share what I got in meditation this morning?
Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah. So I was sharing, what Ben's referring to is that in our pre-talk before we pressed record here, we're just talking a little bit about you and talking about the audience, you. And in my meditation this morning, I use several forms of meditation, but one of them is a mantra meditation. A mantra is a Sanskrit word that doesn't necessarily have a direct translation. So like namaha or soham are two words that can be used for somebody who doesn't have a personal mantra that's been gifted to them by a teacher. So you could use namaha, you could use soham. I have a personal mantra that is private, that isn't shared, that I use, and that mantra becomes a key. It's like a boat that takes you. This is how one of my teachers, Paul Mueller-Ortega, so I very much want to credit him for this teaching. He describes this form of meditation, this mantra meditation, as a boat that takes you into the river of consciousness. So I was using my mantra this morning, and I'm sitting in meditation, and I'm sitting in the space of how do I show up and be of best service today? And who are you, the listeners who might need to hear this today? And what might come through me, and how can I serve? And what I heard was actually, it wasn't even a hurt, it was what I felt, was that mantra just kept taking me deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into, in tantric philosophy, it would be called the heart of Shiva. And Shiva is a creator-destroyer, mythological figure, kind of deity, kind of like, it's, yeah. And without going too much into that, too deep into that, what I got was that the audience, you are very deep already, that many of you know how to take yourself into that stream of consciousness and to be super connected and present on a daily basis as a practice. And then there's others who are here that maybe something that comes through Ben or something that comes through myself today, me today, might offer a way to even dive deeper.
Yeah, beautiful. It's so true. It's so true. It's just what it is. I love it. So Sheryl, do you have anything on your mind that is bubbling in lately, like how you're seeing the world? What's going on? I'd like to just start with I was thinking, like, what's been going on? Like, is there anything that's kind of got some energy around it, frustration or passion behind, like the behaviors of people or what's going on a little bit more top level?
Yes, many things.
Yeah.
Where to start? I'm fascinated with this concept lately of coming home from war, like a metaphoric concept. So I want to dance lightly at the beginning of this and give deep respect to anybody who has actually served physically in a literal combat kind of war place. And I don't want to diminish, I don't want this comparison to diminish in any way or to make it seem like, oh, everybody else has been there too. We haven't. Those of us who have not served in that way have not served in that way. So with great respect and humility for that. And I think that many people on the planet, if not most people, if not all people, have had an experience in their life that has had some level of their consciousness at war. So we kind of lean into that place of like, what's been our big beef with the world? What is it that we so deeply want healed in the world? And in a certain way, that's our place of like where the war has been. And I think about other ways, like, well, what if you don't know what your big beef is with the world? Like, well, what do you so deeply want to protect your children from? In a fierce way, in an inexplicable way. And if you don't have children yet, but you have nieces or nephews, or you have young children around you, or you dream of having a child one day, or you just lean into that, what if I did have a child? What would I so deeply want to protect them from? And it's often this place of whatever ways we were wounded. We so deeply don't want our kids to be wounded in the same ways that we've been wounded. And the beauty of that kind of inquiry takes us right into, well, those are the ways that we've been at war in the world. Any of the ways that we've experienced abuse of power, any of the ways we've experienced powerlessness. And then that takes me into a whole nother level of inquiry and questioning in response to your original question of what am I thinking about right now and what do I think is kind of in a big picture. Yeah, so I'm fascinated with this. How do we come home from war? Because I think that's what it's going to take to shift, to have us move out of this state of the different spiritual teachings call this time period that we're coming out of different things. So in the tantric philosophy, it's called the Kali Yuga, and it's like we're coming out of the dark ages, the Kali Yuga, and into the Sat Yuga, which is like truth or like the enlightened time period. We had all the prophecies around 2012. So there was the Mayan prophecy, there was the Inca prophecy, there are all these prophecies. In the tradition that I'm mostly steeped in, I'm steeped somewhat inside of Tantra, and I'm steeped inside of Peruvian ancient medicine ways, the Laika people from the mountains of Peru. And inside of those studies and teachings, which are sometimes called shamanic teachings, which the word shaman can be a big scary word for people. Sure. So I just want to kind of demystify that for a moment. What that word really means for me is it means that people who are in touch with the aliveness of all things. So people who are in touch with the life. So when we are speaking to each other, that we are awake, that there is aliveness inside this other person. There's a core essence inside this other person that I want to be in reverence with and in rapport with, regardless of how that person is showing up with me in this moment in the world. Is that helpful?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it's very clear. I love this idea of like when you say coming home from war, my whole inside shake. Like it's like, oh wow. I'm like, I can identify with this big time. It's just never heard it like that.
Yeah.
It's like, of course, my life has been a war. Like I just start thinking about it, and it's like, but I do feel like the last couple of years of, man, have I come out of that? That like it really feels like, man, I'm coming out of that war. But I believe there's still more. You know what I mean? But then I think my other reaction was, man, I think people are running from war, and I feel like it's almost like I wonder if they need to embrace and own that. Like it's almost like we want to get away from war, get away from this fight. But I think there's a level of healing that has to happen where you almost become in relationship and own it and go through that process of really owning the war versus running from the war. I don't know. You know what I'm saying at all?
I do. And let's ground it in some way. So how do any of us run from the war? Because I think we've all done it, right? So any of the ways that we have numbed out, pleasured out, got aggressive with ourselves or others. And those three teachings come from Pema Chodron of the Buddhist faith, Buddhist teachings, Buddhist meditation teacher. Her work is amazing. And so, well, what does that look like if we're going to pleasure out or numb out? Well, we can pleasure out through sex when we really just want to comfort ourselves, but aren't in right relationship, aren't in a loving relationship, or that's held inside of a sacred container. Or maybe we're in a relationship and we could even be married to somebody, but it's still not held inside of a sacred container. And it's just a way that you're trying to take the edge off of things.
For sure.
Create and co-create through that space. We have the opioid crisis that's happening. Don't tell me that's not people running away from war.
Yeah.
That is people running away from war. You know? And I don't want to make substance use bad or wrong in the sense of I'm not promoting it in any way, but with great compassion. Who of us has not tried to numb out in some way in our life, even through
TV?
TV, through food, through shopping, through buying things, just getting that hit through social media, through all of these different ways. And I think that because our culture has become so obsessed with our phones and our computers and our technology, which, hey, I love that our technology can be in service of us connecting and us connecting with everybody who is in need of hearing something that comes through today. It's amazing, right?
Beautiful. Love it too. Fully embrace it.
Yeah, but if we wake up and we're on our phones before we sit with ourselves or greet the light of day, and if we go to sleep and our comfort, our new security blanket is our phone that we're reading all kinds of news on before we go to sleep, it's another form of running from the war. And again, with great compassion, all we're trying to do in those spaces is comfort ourselves. We are trying to self-soothe.
So what would be an example of a totally healthy way to create that? So instead of saying, this is the alternative, it's like the alternative of what we're trying to, the alternative of the authentic. What would be the authentic way to experience that soothe? Yeah.
So first off, I don't want to claim to totally know the healthy way because I am not yet levitating.
It's so true. So true. Well, let's just establish that now for everybody. Everyone's on a journey.
Yes, exactly. And what I've discovered and what I love about a lot of the indigenous teachings is they take you back to the earth. We have these beautiful shelters that shelter us and keep us out of a direct relationship with the earth. We're not used to anymore walking the land as a daily practice. Now, some of us do that. Some of us wake up and greet the sun. So let me go through some rituals that help people connect. So in the morning, if the first thing that you do when you wake up is go open a window and find the sunlight, or find where the sun's up. If you get up so early that the sun hasn't risen yet, find the direction where it looks a little bit lighter. That's where the sun is coming up. It is amazing that we live on a planet where the sun comes up every day, even behind the clouds. It comes up every day. This is amazing. And so being in relationship with that and being in remembrance of that as we greet the light of day, maybe, just maybe, we'll greet the light inside our own heart next. And maybe, just maybe, when we walk out to our family, we'll greet the light inside of them. And maybe, just maybe, when we go into our work, we'll approach that with seeing the sunshine inside, behind everybody's eyes, inside their heart, behind their skin. So it's like very simple things. So one is greeting the light of day.
Which it's funny, Sheryl, if I could share, it's
please.
funny hearing, maybe it's a change of direction. I don't mean to, but I think about us sitting here and listening to that. And it's funny how I grew up. I grew up in a way where you're like very staunch Christian. And if we were sitting here 15 years ago, I would have said if it's not the Christian, it would be the devil. And it's funny. It's funny. And I'm so past that, but I think about how it's so simple. Like it's so simple. Like you saying, greet the sun could sound totally hairy fairy. And I could just imagine some of my own family members are like, oh my goodness. And I think, but it's so simple. It's so simple. It's so real. It's nothing, but it's practical. It's real.
Right.
By looking at the sun, you can see, it's almost like a practice to be able to see people and to see, you know what I mean? Like, and don't get me wrong. Like it just makes me think of how people hold themselves back from just hearing a word or two wrong or put it into their own belief systems.
And I'm grateful that you bring that up, and you bring up like the some of the places of our skeptical spaces, or the places that shut us down, or the places where we've had religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not to challenge anybody's religious beliefs.
For sure.
And so people who do hold really strong Christian faith, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Do we really think that Jesus went outside and didn't greet the light of sun? That biblical times, people oriented their lives by the stars. That's how they found their way around.
Mm-hmm.
So when the sun came up, that's when you got up. Yeah. When the sun went down, that's when you went to bed. You had candlelight. You didn't have lights. Mm-hmm. So you can get there if if people listening are wanting to get there through a particular faith, whether they're of the Muslim faith, their Christian faith, their Jewish faith, their Buddhist faith, or whatever faith that is, mm-hmm. and you want to get there through your own practices, through your faith, you can do the same thing.
Exactly, 100%.
Right. Yeah.
100%. Love that. It's really good. People are so stuck in just one avenue where they close things down so quickly when there's such magic and there's such, just real. It's nothing scary. This training needs to be unwound a little bit. Yeah.
And to also back up a little bit before we greet the light of sun, it's like your phone actually has to not be plugged in by your bedside. Because the draw to our phones are so strong because of all the likes and hits, and we're just so deeply looking mm-hmm. for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah, totally.
Through that space. And I love our phones. I love that we can connect in these ways, and that it's given us mobile access in all of the ways. Like, so I'm not anti-phone.
Yeah.
I just am wanting our systems to be more attuned to the natural vibrations and rhythms of the earth. Mm-hmm. And so if we wake up and we if we have a beloved and partner, maybe we greet our beloved, maybe we greet the sun, maybe we sit with ourselves. And for those people who really love meditation, to sit with yourself for 20 minutes in meditation, actually sitting upright versus like, oh, well, I just lay in bed and I just kind of contemplate things for 20 minutes. It's actually not the same. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful and mm-hmm. awesome. You can keep doing that, but you will actually get a different benefit from sitting upright. The body retains the information differently, and the body mm-hmm. knows that you're in a devotional practice where you're devoting yourself to that discipleship of that practice.
I love how you say the body knows. I really believe in two brains in a way. It's proven now. Like there's all kinds of science behind it. How we have a second intelligence. They're saying that there's the same cells that are in your brain or in your belly. It literally has 100%. There's some level of intelligence. Our body's repairing itself. We can't control that. Like you cut your arm, you can't tell it to heal. It does its own thing. It literally has its own intelligence.
And yes, we don't need to tell our arm to heal because it knows how to do that because of that sacred intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And part of how I do my work is by communicating with those cells when they've forgotten, to help them remember so that it gets on board. So when any of us are at war with ourselves, so sometimes that can lead to some kind of manifestation in the physiological body.
Yeah, I totally believe that. It reminds me of the story you told me. Like you've actually facilitated actual physical healings, right?
Yes.
Can you talk to that? I think people are absolutely fascinated, and it's a curiosity, whether they believe it or not. There's definitely a curiosity about it. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you discovered that, and then maybe talk around the physical healings. What is that?
Yeah, so I'll talk about how I discovered it first.
Cool.
So I was a high school English teacher in my former career. And I had a deep desire to learn about yoga. And this was like 20 years ago. So nobody was practicing yoga. And it took me literally 3 times of going to the yoga studio. Like the first time I just took a flyer off the outside. I didn't.
Yeah. Super woo-woo, like way not in mainstream at all.
No, right. And the second, like people were maybe talking about Buddhism and maybe something like that, but nobody was talking about yoga at that time. And then but I had this deep call inside of me of I need to know more about this. And the second time I went in and I asked a really important question. I said, do you need special shoes for this? And those of us who practiced yoga know we do.
Yeah, get the swimmers, get the swimming shoes.
Right, so that was the level of my knowledge.
Yeah, that's cool.
But what happened was I had a profound experience in my first yoga class. And my teacher had us with our feet together in Baddha Konasana, where you're sitting upright and the palms of your feet are together. And you fold forward, and like kind of like what as kids we call it butterfly, like sitting with your knees in butterfly, And he said fold forward, and I was like upright, and he came behind me and he put his heart behind my heart, and he started breathing with my breath and pressing me forward. And the left brain was kind of going, I'm going to break. This is not okay. And the right, because I kept going deeper and deeper. And the right brain's like, no, I think I'm okay. And the left brain's like, no, you're going to break. This is not okay. So that was kind of like a war, like, so to get back to this metaphor of like coming home from war, that was, I think, maybe one of the first touch points for me of coming home from war, was the space of, oh my goodness, my nose touched the ground. And I could not believe it. Could not believe it. How could this happen? And it led me on a big, big journey. So I deep dived into yoga about 20 years ago and studied and trained as an instructor, not because I so much wanted to teach. I already had a master's degree in education. I was teaching. It wasn't so much that I wanted to teach yoga, but I was deeply curious about the sacred technology in it, of how it worked. It made no intellectual sense. I was one of those straight A kids, like University of Michigan, like undergrad, master, very academic. My sacred intelligence lives in my brain. What do you mean there's also space in my body? There's a whole more real estate here to embody. And so what ended up happening, flash forward, was I trained and studied, and somebody asked me to sub their class. And so I subbed my first class, and I was all worried that it was going to look like a game of Twister gone very, very bad. So I would forget like right arm here and left arm, whatever. But it didn't. I remembered the flow. But after class, people kept coming up to me and saying, I had pain in that ovary for 6 months, and you touched me and breathed, and it's gone. How did you do that? And I didn't know. And another person came and said he had been grieving the loss of his wife. And I had touched the back of his heart. And it was the first time he didn't feel depressed. And another person came up with another story too. And so it launched me on a big journey. I didn't know that I was doing anything other than adjusting people and poses and breathing, to be really honest.
Yeah.
But when I started piecing it together, like sometimes in hindsight, you can see
For sure.
how this was happening.
Yeah.
When I was about 15 years old, I was trained in meditation by Northwestern University. And so I had been meditating for a long time and knew how to go into stillness really quickly. And then my hands, because I had been a high school English teacher, they say teachers need eyes in the back of their heads. Well, you kind of develop those so that nobody lights a fire in your trash can or climbs up onto your 12-foot cabinets in your room, which I've had happen. So, I think what was happening was I could just sense where the hot spots were in somebody's body, just like I could sense in my classroom where somebody was about to throw a spitball at somebody else and I needed to
hyper awareness.
Yeah, I just kind of could sense it and put out the fire before it started to keep the flow of conversation going. So what I was doing was putting out the fires in people's bodies to keep the flow of energy going. And I just intuitively knew how to do it. And so I started practicing and so forth, but then I really had a deep desire to train with somebody in person. I wanted a human teacher. And I went on a big journey and I studied with healers around the world and found that the shamanic energy path, that the practices worked, the technologies worked over and over again. So I combined those with what I intuitively knew how to do.
Yeah.
And flash forward everything. I've seen people who have cancer have no cancer anymore.
Crazy.
I've seen, there's lots of stories. I cut my hand with glass. Some glass fell on me and broke and cut my hand a few weeks ago. And although I was in shock somewhat, I still was able to stay present and clean it and work on it, also because one of my children was there and saw it happen. And so it kind of calls up that bigger space of you like, okay, so and by the time I got to urgent care, had already healed it and put liquid Band-Aid on it. And they looked at it and they're like, why are you here? And I'm like, well, I didn't know if there's glass still in it, or they're like, no, usually liquid Band-Aid won't work for a cut that deep. And you've done, a good job with it. So everything's good. And so everything from small things to anxiety, to people who've had anxiety for 30 years and have never had a day without depression or anxiety or panic attacks.
There's a question I want to ask you on that note. I have someone that's close to me that just started to have these anxiety moments. He's not that old. And I wanted to ask, he doesn't know what it's from, and they've seen the psychologist and they reframe it a little bit for him. That's kind of what they do. And it was okay. It would help them a lot. But it's like, what is that? I guess it's obviously in context of probably him, but I just think about him and I think, what was this anxiety? All of a sudden this overwhelming anxiety hits where you can't do anything. And he's not that old. What's going on there? Is it a disconnect? I think, is it a disconnect? That was my first thinking.
Yeah, I think your intuition is very on target. My experience of it, first, I just want to speak, I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And so there are people inside those paradigms that have really valuable lenses on it and can offer different things than what I can offer.
Yes, good point.
What I can offer is from a spiritual place. My experience of it is that there is a disconnect at the soul level, and there's been some soul loss, and the system's aware that there's soul loss. And by soul loss, we mean that, we have phrases like somebody gets into a car accident and we say they've been shocked out of their skin.
Yeah.
Well, what if that actually happens? So what if part of the luminous energy field that is connected with inside of us as us throughout our life due to trauma can go, oh, this human gig, I'm out of here. Part of the soul can go this is painful. This human experience, I don't know how to hold myself intact and experience this level of suffering, this level of disappointment, this level of humiliation, this level of rejection, this level of trauma, of abuse of power, whatever it is, powerlessness. So those moments, because we don't yet have the awakeness or intactness to feel the magnitude of it sends part of the soul out of the body. And it's not really willing to come back until it knows that it can stay, until the system has some tools or techniques in place where it will hold it intact. So part of my work is going on journey through meditative state, going and finding the parts that have been gone out of body and bringing it back into the self. It can be like, any of us might have had a moment where like, we've done all this personal work, and yet this person comes with this certain type of energy that it just triggers you. And all of a sudden you're like 3 years old again.
Yeah, like where did that come from?
Work.
Yeah,
like
I thought this was done. Yeah.
Right. Or 6 years old again, or 8 or 18 or 26 or whatever age the trauma happened at. It's like we regress. It's almost like we slip through a tear in time. And and so the work is about how do we help people connect back into themselves in that space and know that they can stay present inside themselves, because when any of us are present inside that moment, we can speak inside of ourselves against abuse of power or against, on behalf of ourselves, even if we're in the moment of rejection. We can speak and say, that's okay. You can reject me. I don't have to.
Yeah.
I can still stand here loving myself and you.
For sure. I feel like when I've gone through so much stuff in my life as well. Like I've been one messed up human being for a long time and I had to work out a lot of things. But now I can see people, and I see that when those times come, those triggers are beautiful because it's the only time you get a good face-to-face with it. You know what I mean? Like I look at it going, I actually get really excited when I get to that place where I'm freaking out or I have this moment. I'm like, okay, this is the time. This is the time I get to look. Because there's only a few times you get that close, to have that close of a look to that stuff. But most people just run and get away from it. I like to say, look, just look at it. Like find a place. I know it's going to be crazy inside you. I know just when you have that trigger, that anger, the depression, the anxiety, I want you to look right at it. Because there's some clues we need. It's right there, and you can see some of the stuff you can't see when you're just, I got to get out of this. I got to get through it. Meditate, or whatever. Do a run, go to the gym. Or whatever we do to get through those moments, I just feel like you need to sit and look at it. There's not many times you're going to be in that place, that close to it. And you get a way clearer look if you can just, in the midst of it, sit with it.
Absolutely, 100%, Ben. That's that phrase that the only way out is through.
Yeah.
That and how hard it can be, like with great compassion for all of us, how hard it can be to sit with a feeling. And the tricky part is often we sit with our thoughts in those moments.
So good.
And our thoughts are crazy pants. Like take a ride on the crazy train that we've been going on around and around. That is not going to get us out of that moment.
Yeah.
It's how do we sit with the feeling, that raw feeling underneath all of those thoughts? Because the thoughts are most likely not true about whatever we're telling ourselves.
Or even not accurate or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's why someone like yourself is here. I feel like there's times where people really need someone to hold that space for them. Yes. And I feel like that's the value of that. Like Philip McKernan was someone that helped me with that as well. He had to call me in a lot of bullshit, but then he created a space where you can find yourself. And I feel like that's where I really believe in, like coach is such a weird word, and executive coach and all these weird words we use to try to describe healing and breakthrough and transformation and helping people. But I really feel like that's one of the most valuable things is when you have someone like yourself or someone that you're working with that can just hold that space for you so you can sit in that feeling. And I feel like a lot of times you need that help, but not help to get there or anything. Just give me that space, that moment in time, create an environment where I can just sit with it. Because our environments don't really serve that. We create environments to not do that on purpose, subconsciously.
Agreed. And then there's also agreed. It's almost like when I heard you talking about that word in coach and what else we could call it. It's like professional space holder, like a professional space holder.
And how well does that work? Hey, so it's $1,000 a month. We're going to hold space for you. It's like, what the frick? There's the practical way of communicating on people's levels so they can understand, so you can get them in the door and then you can get to their heart.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also that what I learned, what I learned at shaman school was how to help remove some of um, the energetic gunk that gets lodged in
Mm,
people's system,
mm,
so it's removing some of the mass, some of the density, so that you can actually see the light behind your eyes again, so you can see the
mhm.
light behind your skin
Love
again,
that.
so that it's easier to make these shifts and it's easier to stay. And then what I found was that some of my clients and students were getting almost like habituated or addicted to me going in and
Yeah.
removing gunk.
Yeah.
And my background is different. My
Excuse me.
background is not sales or business, although I've learned a lot in business and love like strategy and innovation and helping people find their purpose
Yeah,
and,
me too.
all that. Right. So,
Got it for sure.
yeah. So my background is in education of how do I help people have the tools and technologies to learn to hold space for themselves. And
Mm,
that's where I started downloading these meditative techniques that are not just sitting with a mantra, but they're actually, it's a little bit like doing yoga inside of
hmm.
your meditation, because it's more call response and it's more journey work, that there's specific protocols that you can do to learn to stay, to
Mm.
practice staying with yourself in those spaces so that we become our own self-healer.
Yeah, it's amazing how, like, I think it's a really good way to grade and to assess the person that you've chosen to work with, is if they are trying to get you to eliminate the coach. That's our mission. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm not there to be needed. I'm there to get you to believe in yourself, and then you can fly. And it's not a lifelong journey. It's like I'm here to support you, and I'm here to get you off and running, and I'll be here forever. That's fine. But I feel like there's that. It's really important to understand who is coaching you, and if they always are the ones that need to help you, I don't believe that they're the best servant to you. I really believe we need to eliminate ourselves as coaches, teachers, healers, or whatever. I think, like you just said, you just find a way that, like, if you can't just keep coming to me. That doesn't do nothing. That's not real. That's just me being
Yeah.
this guy that heals people or whatever, but not like you can't do that. This doesn't serve them.
Agreed. And there's always times where, like, so you might have a client that got really great results from working one-on-one with you. I'm sure you have
Hmm.
many,
Yeah.
of those. And they then might get up on their feet and in a new way and have made their transformation. And then the nature of life seems
Yeah.
to be that then, we hit our next big
For
place.
sure.
All of a
For
sudden,
sure.
like, dang, I'm a caterpillar again.
Yeah.
And I'm about to go into liquefied mess meltdown in this chrysalis. And I don't yet have the butterfly wings, but I'm moving
100%.
in the world in this way, or I'm showing up and doing all these things, and it's really awkward and uncomfortable to not have the butterfly wings. And so they might come back to you.
100%, which is
And
cool. Like, that's so cool.
yeah,
It's so important. I know people that I've worked with for years, and then they're gone for a few years, and then they come back and we work for more years. Life changes, but
yeah,
it is that healthy relationship, knowing that we're there to get them to be strong. You know what I
correct.
mean? Get them to be healed and strong, and to go on their own. I had a mentor for 8 years straight.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And now we're just friends, and it's just I needed
yeah,
that, but it wasn't always just running to get help. It was truly, it turned into creating a space so I could find myself.
yeah,
It's more, it evolves. It definitely evolves. So question for you.
yeah.
You were in Necker Island, right? I would say nectar. I think it should be
It's kind
nectar.
of both.
You know,
It's
I
kind of
just feel
both.
like it's such a
Very
cool
different
thing. Like,
places. Yeah.
it's got cool factor on it. So I wanted to kind of just say, like, so how did that happen? Like, you went and spoke at Richard Branson's island. Like, what was that
Yeah.
about?
So there's an organization called Maverick 1000, and Yannick Silver and Sophia Umansky run that organization and are amazing entrepreneurs. And they knew me and knew of my work, and they invited me to the first year be the keynote speaker. On the
Cool.
first year I was there, they invited me to come and be the keynote speaker. And to be really honest, I was terrified.
Oh, for sure.
Um, and excited, and
Hmm.
had an amazing opportunity of as the boat arrived on the island, because a little boat takes you over to a Necker boat, comes and gets you and takes you over to the island. And as I got off, and the person who was in service to me was driving me in a little golf cart, 'cause no cars on the island, it's a big rock. And he was taking me in a golf cart, and he just looked at me and goes, "You're a healer."
Wow.
Yeah, and I looked at him and I said, "As are you."
Back
So,
at you.
yeah. So we just
Cool.
kind of saw the light in each
Such a
other.
cool moment.
Yeah, beautiful young man. And so I arrived, and it was pretty fascinating. I arrived, but my luggage did not.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so there I was presenting on Necker, and the night before, I realized all I had was my travel clothes
Yeah.
that I had been in for, like 24 hours at that point.
Oh no.
Washed them out in the sink, and hung them to dry overnight.
Oh my goodness.
Put them back on in the morning. And I realized it was a really interesting moment, because I realized that, you know what, nobody on that island cared. Richard was going to be in a bathing suit, and Sir Richard was going to be in a bathing suit, on the island, call him Richard. And everybody else was going to be in t-shirts and shorts. Nobody cared what outfit I had picked out for that presentation.
Yeah.
But it kind of takes us full circle to the beginning of the call, where you said, like, what are you tracking on a global level?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are places, like with that coming back for more, I think for many, for the feminine, it's not even for women, it's for the feminine inside of all of us. The places where there's that need to present, and need to present oneself in a certain way. And it's fascinating. In Glennon Doyle's book, Love Warrior, which came out maybe 5 years ago, but I actually just read it a few months ago. It's an amazing book. She talks about her own journey with, she had bulimia, she was an alcoholic, she was an addict, and she realized she was pregnant, and she had to get sober really fast. Yeah. And she did, and she became a profound, amazing speaker and teacher, really. But what she realized was that at a young age, what created that bulimia for her was she just got these socialized messages. The most important thing for a girl is to be thin. Then the next most important thing is to be pretty, but thin's more important than pretty.
Crazy.
And after thin and pretty, you need to be people need to be attracted to you. I can't remember the third one, so check the book for the third one, but that's my recollection of it. So there was some of the war of that I had the opportunity in that moment of feeling triggered, like what you were saying before, of sitting with that trigger and realizing, oh my goodness, you know what? They don't care what I wear. They don't even care what I look like. They don't care if my hair is done. Yeah. They don't care if I have makeup on. They don't care about any of that. They have invited me to speak there for what might move through me in that day as an offering. Can I show up with that? And then the next year I was invited back, and I taught yoga in the morning, and I led a ceremony, rites, gifted everybody who came to it. I think it was Seer's rites. There are 9 rites. In many spiritual teachings, there are rites that are transmitted energetically. And I think that the rites that I gave, I can't remember if it was the Seer's rites or a different one, but let's say it was the Seer's rites. They allow people to see as they've always been meant to see, through the eyes of the heart and the eyes of the third eye. And then I did one-on-ones with people on the island.
So cool. It's so cool. So I was just thinking, when you think about yourself and you think about like something in your gut that says, man, I would like to do this, what would that be? Would you share that? I know we always have, I think we keep them secret on purpose. And I feel like I'd love to see if you're willing to put out what do you want? Like, what would you really like to happen? Even if it was go to the moon, okay, or go to Mars, but like no limitations. Like, what does Sheryl want?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Ben. It's for me, I think it's more like what do I need to do in this lifetime before I die? And those are my wants.
Would you share some of those?
Yeah. So one of them is I have a few books in me. Cool. That I've been working on, but I am wanting to get those out to the world. Another is a school. So I really want to teach other people how to do my own version of what I do. And and there's so many different aspects of that. There's a whole curriculum for business owners who, just because there's all these tools and technologies, these sacred indigenous technologies that I help people stop the leaks in their business and get more flow through. And I want to teach people how to do that for themselves inside their businesses. And then there's the aspect of the personal stuff of anything that are our personal issues. We walk into our business with us, whether we want to or not. It walks in
for sure.
with us, you know.
I get that world.
Yeah.
So is there like a place you want to speak? Is there like is there anything, places you want to go in your life that would be like, oh, that'd be so cool?
In terms of places I'd like to speak, it's really, I think it's more, I just hold it like any place that feels that my offerings, what moves through me, can be of service. That's where I want to speak.
Yeah, beautiful. Love that.
Yeah, and in terms of places I'd like to see, I'd love to see, I don't know why even, I just have a calling to New Zealand and Australia. So I have a calling there for something, but I don't know yet what. I love Europe, and I love being in Europe. I love the history inside the design, and it's like an artist's feast.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I haven't gone. It's on the list.
Yeah. So, so I don't really have, I don't have a specific, like, oh, I'd really like to speak at this event.
Yeah.
Just, I want to speak where I'm needed. And and my audience is really people who, I'm not interested in trying to convert anybody to spirituality or trying to convince people that you need to be self-reflective about your life. I'm interested in working with people who are already there and who want to go deeper.
Yeah, beautiful. That's good clarity.
And also inside of education, I have dreams and goals and give backs to that.
Like real, like practical, traditional education to get inside that?
Well, so understand that's where I came from.
For sure.
So I was developing programs and had a program called, it was originally called Yoga Right, and it was called Whole Self Literacy. And it was yoga, healing, and writing for teachers. And so that teachers could go back into their classrooms and teach reading and writing from a place of authenticity. So I work with authors. Sometimes many of my clients are best-selling authors and so forth. And so sometimes they'll bring their next book to me, and I'll apply like there's a lot of craft. I was a teacher.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool how we collide our stuff together. It's all this meant to be kind of, and I really believe that anything can work. I really believe that it's got the same essence. Now, how do people, are you taking any new clients, Sheryl? Are you open to clients?
Yeah, so I am taking new clients right now. Often there's a wait list, but I'd opened up my schedule to be able to work on some other things for the last few months.
So I know there's a few things on your website I've looked at, so you do one-to-ones, you come into a corporate setting with a group and you work with families. Like, can you tell me a little bit about, I just want to promote you, to be honest. I want people to be like, get exposed to you. So I'm just like, sell yourself in a way, like, and you're not like that. I get it. So, but, so one-to-ones, like, what are the things, how can someone get a hold of you? How do they get engaged with you?
Yeah, so for one-to-ones, people can email me at Sheryl Sheryl's SHERYL at goodenergyheals.com.
Maybe in the show notes.
Okay.
I'll put in the show notes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So people can email me is the best way to get in touch with me for one-to-ones. If for the family events, people have flown me onto their family vacations with them to work with 3 generations.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
I should build a coaching program like that. You're so smart. I'm like, yep, I come with you on vacation. And don't worry, I'm going to help you. But I like margaritas,
And the ocean is my...
And I need a lot of free time to think about how I'm going to work with you. Like I need my own chalet. I'm going to do about 15 minutes a day. And the rest of the time I'm going to be meditating for you.
You could do it that way. I didn't really do it that way. But
no. Sorry, that's my program.
What happened was, so part of that actually happened because one of my clients wanted to fly me out to do an event for his company, and the timing didn't work for me. I couldn't do the date he wanted, and so he's like, okay, come the week before, come with my family on a family vacation.
Well,
okay. Why?
That's awesome. No, I think it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
so
I think it just fits
yeah,
so like it's pretty
right.
vulnerable for them. That's pretty cool. You
It
get to see the
is.
real deal.
Yeah, it's a deep honor. And really think about it, like our deepest stuff of like the pink elephants in the room that everybody is pretending aren't there are in our most intimate
It's
relationships.
true.
They're in our most intimate relationships of our family of origin. So this was like a 3-generation of a family situation. And I worked with each person individually and some like couples work. And
It's amazing.
yeah, and I love it. And
For sure. That sounds so amazing. That's so
yeah,
cool.
and watching like a soul retrieval on a little girl of seeing her come back into herself and
Crazy.
seeing like her parents recognize that, oh my goodness, we have our girl back. We haven't seen her show up like this inside herself, so that's all amazing. I've had families that like a year after somebody passed away, they flew me out to be part of a ceremony, to create ceremony and to hold space for the family to reorient itself. Something's now missing. How do we structure ourselves now? How do we have and deepen relationship? And then for companies, I love working. The same thing happens. There's pink elephants in the room in companies too, where the CEO really wants customer service to beef up customer service, and maybe the CEO, he or she doesn't feel like customer service really understands customer service.
Yeah.
And maybe customer service feels like the CEO doesn't really understand them and what they're doing. And so it's it kind of comes down to like, do we see each other? Do we hear each other? How can we know each other?
Yeah.
And how can we remove the places where we've been at war? Because that's why we think other people don't see us. And that's why we don't let other people see us. And so I go in and I have structured programs that a lot of times people are like, well, how do you do that? Like with the whole religion thing? Like, well, I don't work in a religious way. I work in a spiritual way, but it's all about how do we connect to ourselves and others.
Yeah.
And so we hold it in that frame, and people are hungry for this work.
People are so hungry.
And so grateful. And when I go into a company for individual sessions, it's always optional. It's always, you have to,
Good.
I won't, if you're going to, and I won't tell, there has to be confidentiality for each person. So I won't tell the CEO what any of the employees or teammates have shared with me. And
you have to, or else no one's going to be in.
Correct. Exactly. So it's holding deep privacy.
That's really cool.
So did I answer the question?
You like really answered it. Like that's probably, I've been trying to figure out what you do for a while. And I'm just like, that is really, really clear, like super clear. I think it's a matter of if someone feels that Sheryl's a good fit, I just wouldn't hesitate. Your brain's going to go into calculations. I just think make the phone call and feel the connection. If it's not there, then don't do it. But if it is, then you got a chance to have a little bit of magic and some things going on for sure.
Agree. The part I didn't share is that the one-on-ones are usually remote. So about 90, 95. So we talked about flying me out, people flying me in. But when I'm working one-on-one with people, it's like this, like you and I can feel what's happening in the system and often affect change, even though that sounds kind of crazy. But we don't think about like our garage door opener sends waves of energy and it opens the garage door, and our TV remote, we touch
radio.
it. Right. So I can sense the human energy waves and the human energy system remotely.
And if someone wanted to bring you out as a keynote speaker, because I know that's something you've done, and do you do like a yoga thing? Like what would it say? Hey, I want you to come out to a retreat and be part of it. So is this something that you do?
Absolutely. And there's sometimes I'll create a new speech for that community if there's something new that's needed. And I also have ones that I've already done, like how do we have the real conversation is one that I've done more recently. I'm going to be creating one on coming home from war, this topic. And then there's other ones that are kind of have more of like if the group is really interested in spirituality and wants to learn how to time travel and wants to learn how
this is like the advanced level.
There are ones that are there too, but the group doesn't have to be that advanced because I can put it in everyday language and in a certain way, demystify the mystical aspect of it,
Yeah.
just so we can access it.
So it's really cool how you put things into everyday language. I love the fact that you can let go of your culture to speak to other cultures. And I think about that in a religious standpoint where people have to use their culture. Like, this is the way, the truth, the light, in a way, right? Like, the thing is, if it really is about people, well, then leave your culture to the side and speak to them in their language and connect with them. And I love that you do that. Like, you can, like, you've got some, like, if we went into it, like, half the stuff that you're going to talk about, where Sharma and all the Shama and all the different things, it's like you would have, I'd need definition books sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, to really, cause I'm not in that, I don't know it as much as you do. I have no problem with it, but it's just cool how you can bring it down to a very practical and human connection, but you can still send the same spirit through. You know what I mean? I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, they're all the same at the root. And so it's more a sense of, I think I hold it like, I think I hold it like it's all the same culture when I go down deep enough to the root of it. So I'm holding it from the root space of,
It's a cool way to see it. Yeah.
yeah, and that there's no separation. The separation is all the Maya, the illusion, our delusion. So the moments we forget, which is part of the human experience, and nothing wrong with that. We forget. It's just painful and suffering when we forget. And so that place of just that deep remembrance of there's really only one of us here inside of the consciousness, that global infinite consciousness.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sure, that lives inside of each of us as us. So there is the uniqueness of you, Ben, who's showing up here and leading and holding space from all the experiences that you've lived and all the trauma that you've dissolved in whatever ways you've dissolved it, to be able to show up and walk clean in the world and be able to hold space and be able to sit with other people suffering as you do, so they can have their transformative experiences, and so that you can give platform to other people and all of the ways that you do that and share your gifts. All of that space of being able to show up and collaborate and to say, oh, I see you. Oh, I know you. Oh, that's really me in there, beyond all of our stuff, all the ways that I've had traumas and experiences in my life that have coded me in certain ways until I dissolve them or release them. So that I think underneath it, it's maybe what you're calling culture, of being able to step out of that. I would call an imprint or a samskara or a limiting belief or a code or because I think in some ways, and maybe it's not, there's lots of different ways to look at the beauty of culture and the pain of culture and the suffering of culture. But there's a way that it's kind of like we're all one petri dish with different experiences. And like, so if we take like the culture of what you culture in a petri dish, like where's the essence of underneath before anything grows? And what do we want to grow? And how do we feed that space inside of one another so that more energy goes to that space, so more of that space grows? So I tend to and also I think like from teaching, when you teach high school English, you often are given books like Romeo and Juliet. And students come in, and by 10th, 11th, 12th grade, they have beliefs about themselves as readers. And they might not have grown up in standard English vernacular. They might not have grown up speaking the language of power in their culture. So you take somebody who may not have formal syntax inside of English language, and then you give them something that's medieval or old English, and they have to now code switch thee and thy and wherefore art thou and all of this. So I learned from teaching how to code switch. So I would take the theme of the story and have my students act it out in the classroom before we'd ever read the story. So like the Crucible, they're like, okay, so I'd put them into modernized versions of the drama. and they would get it.
I love
and
that.
then we could go in.
Love
so
that.
I learned from teaching how to code switch. Like every time you see the word thy, it means this. Every time you see the word thou, what does it mean, guys? Let's figure it out. Let's go in there. Let's unpack it.
It's so cool. You help them really understand before they just read it. So here's a thing. I'm going to wrap up here. I always put myself in a position to be challenged, to be questioned. I sadistically like that for some reason. In a weird way, you put yourself in positions and it's like, this sucks, but I like it. It doesn't have to be like that. I'm just making it more extreme. But I always ask the person that I'm interviewing to if they have a question for me. And if they have a question, if not, that's totally fine. But I always put it on the table. Say, if you've got a question for me, I'm willing to answer. Yeah,
I do have a question for you, but I don't know that it's necessarily for your growth, as it is that it's just a sense that somebody on the call needs to hear the story.
Cool.
And maybe something for you will come out of it too. Earlier in our talk, you were talking about triggers. You were talking about, you're like, Sheryl, I think that, when any of us get triggered in that space, we need to not move away from it. We need to go into it. And you were saying that from your own life, that's where you learned. And there was something that happened for you there. And so I'm wondering if there's one of those moments where you felt really triggered by something and something came up. And sorry, the second thing that's coming up and it's tangential is, and maybe it's related to this, but there's something about religion that's coming up.
Oh, there's lots about that. There's so many, my brain already has 5 stories, but I'm thinking like, where do I need to be? So there's always that relationship with your brain and your heart that happens. I've had a mass amount of trauma, a max amount of challenges in my life that weren't self-inflicted. It was almost like I was born into some challenging situations. I think of 2, but there was a time where I'm just trying to
Want me to support you choosing one?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of it's more like there's a few stories I could share about looking at they're staring down, looking right at what's going on.
Which one cracked open? Actually, if you would close your eyes for 1 minute.
Okay.
And just kind of drop in. And which one of those triggers might have any little bit of hotness left to it, if any? But which one of those is calling you that says pick me? This one is and scary. Which one is the scariest?
And so it was something that I feel like I'm not too scared anymore. You know what I mean? It used to be oof, that's a big one. Oh, I don't know. I'm pretty open.
Yeah.
As open as I can 100% be as I am today. I know there's lots of my life that's probably still hidden in blind spots, and that's the journey, but I don't have the charge. That's why it's a little bit more difficult. Oh, this is I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
I think there's 3 topics. There's business, my wife's relationship, and religion. Religion still triggers me. Religion is fresh still, but I believe that's kind of because I need to go there. I'm way more peaceful about it than I've ever been, but that's a trigger for me when I see someone believing something that's adopted. That really triggers me. But so I don't know how to talk around that. That's pretty fresh.
Yeah. Go back to the relationship one with your wife if you if you have permission to.
For sure. I'm open on that. So I remember when my wife told me that she was going to leave me. And so what happened was we moved to our acreage about 6 years ago, even 4.5 years ago. And I had this intense drive just to get shit done the way I want to get done. And I had these blind spots. And I remember she didn't want to move, but I made it happen. Like I just made that happen, kind of a controller, kind of push through and convince her. And it's almost like it's easier just to say yes to Ben. And so that to me is like, it's hard to say because it's not nice and it feels like it's sad. You know, it's almost like I mourn the past when I look back. And so I remember sitting there and life was tough. And she goes, Ben, I've been following you around forever. I've been following you around. We've gone everywhere. And we've moved 9 times. And now we moved here again. I didn't want to move here. And you just don't get it. And it was like sitting there and she goes, I really don't want to do this anymore. And it was like the realest, it hit me hard and it made me, it was almost like I didn't want to look at what was going on. And what was happening was I would change things so much. I would change things on an ongoing basis. As soon as I found success, I'd change it and restart it. Like 2 or 3 times in my life, just bring it right back down to restart. I got something new and wouldn't listen to Renee. She's seen it. I just wouldn't listen. And it wasn't what I was willing to listen. I just couldn't see it. And it took this moment where she completely said, that's it, which is a really interesting lesson for people to do is, to speak their truth. I sat there and cried on the floor and I said, I fucked up. Man, did I fuck this up. And I realized I was trying to live for I was trying to live for my wife and kids. I would say that. I think a lot of us say that, but I don't think it's real half the time now that I've gone through this, because I realized I was not living for my wife and kids. I had this weird sense of unworthiness or don't know how to handle success or whatever the psychology is behind it. I would just go and turn it all around and have to restart and deserve to always be working hard. Why make it easy? Like all these different belief systems. So I had to really look at what was going on. And if you look at my YouTube channel from, I don't know what it is, 2013, 14, all of a sudden there's no videos. There's nothing for like 2 years because I realized that it is what I wanted was my wife and kids. And it really made me look at, without that moment, without that experience, it's pretty extreme, but man, it made me look directly in the eyes of what I did not want to see, which I was running from constantly. I was always busy for that reason. And so I feel like it wasn't a trigger. It was a Mack truck that hit me. And for me, that almost had to happen. In my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know how else I would have seen it. I was so on a mission and stop dead. And my soul is, I 100% believe my wife and kids are a main priority in my life now. And that's something I don't have to question. I know that. And they know that. And it's an amazing relationship right now. Best it's ever been. But that process, I had to look at myself hard. It was a really hard process. I had to look at myself.
What did you see in that space?
What
did you see in the masculine tendencies in that space that you had been trained in the culture? That a man does this, that this is like...
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I felt like it was... I don't know how to answer that. I just saw, and it was almost like I had to look at what I was doing was not connected to what I thought I was doing. It was a complete disconnect. And I was on a mission to build and help my family, but I wasn't. It was on a mission to build up my own thing. And it was very selfish in the sense where I would cover it with, it's for my family, which is a weird thing to say now that I look back and I'm like, I totally said it was for my family, which I believed, but it wasn't. So I would just, so I don't know if that answers it, but
it does. And thank you for your courage and your vulnerability. Because when we talk about coming back from war and it's like to go, so that's the small, like up close version of it, right?
Yeah.
And then if we go back out to like some socialized cultural aspects of it, we were talking about culture before. Mm-hmm. And if we go out even farther than that, if we zoom the lens back even bigger, we're looking at the ways that our culture is coming back from this war. And the war, in some ways, has been an imbalance of the masculine energy and the feminine energy on the planet. And we can think about it like men and women, if that's helpful. So you can think about it like the archetype of a male structure was actually to lead the family. You were doing everything that you were programmed to do.
Yeah.
You're supposed to lead the family. You're supposed to make the decisions, whether they were right or wrong, move the momentum through it, move it forward.
Yeah.
And that's the masculine energy. That's
Yeah.
what you were cultured
For sure.
and raised to
So
do.
I saw my dad and mom. My mom just served my dad.
Correct.
And whatever my dad did, she goes, "I'll support you." She goes, whatever you want to do, I'll be there for you. It was the good wife.
Correct.
That's what the example I saw.
So those are the archetypes and the structure. And so you're operating inside of those neural pathways of that socialized imprint until it disrupted. And then when it got disrupted, when Renee came to you and said, this isn't what I signed up for, there's sometimes a moment of like, oh, wait, but I thought I was doing everything right.
Yeah.
Like I thought I was doing my role.
Yeah.
You're doing your role, but you weren't what you woke up to and so courageously looked at was you actually had to strip off the roles of what society had told you it looked like to be a good man, a good husband, and a good wife. You were a good provider, you were making decisions, you were leading, you were hardened in some ways, which you were supposed to be, according to that archetype.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be disconnected. That archetype, how does that archetype, if you're going to stay in that archetype and only do that archetype is in some ways designed when it's out of balance, which it's been in our culture, there's not room for the full expression of the feminine, even inside the man. And that expression of the feminine is that space of like, well, what if your mom actually had her own dreams? Beyond maybe your mom's total dream was actually, some people come into this lifetime and their purpose is to support somebody else's dream and coming on. But I don't believe that half the planet's mission is that.
100%. I'm with you. I totally get it.
I believe it's all feminine, right?
Yeah.
So what, so some of the small story of that to go to the bigger story, like what we're seeing on the planet right now, this kind of takes us full circle to the beginning of the call when you were asking, like, what are the trends I'm seeing? And what am I seeing in the big white? This is actually the war that we're figuring out how to put down. And it's scary as all get out for most of us because the feminine now has this, like now we have women in U.S. government. We didn't have that many women.
Yeah.
We don't have it, it's not balanced yet. I think in Canada, Canada has been ahead of the curve on that, really. And if we go back to Indigenous tribe times, the women elders chose the next leader of the tribal nation.
Cool.
The grandmothers chose. It's fascinating.
It's really cool.
So we're coming into balance with, well, what if actually women do have power, but how do we do it in a way that men, like, so there's this imbalance where masculine has been that trajectory of always having to look like it knows what it's doing inside of men and women, and always needing to know the next right thing, even if we don't.
Yeah.
And needing to move the ideas forward, even if it's before they're ready, even if it's before they're right. Pluck the fruit before it's right because somebody's got to eat.
Yeah, get it done.
Yeah, get her done.
Get her done.
Right?
Yeah.
And then there's the feminine that's been in this subservient position that's been like, okay, I'll just be in service to the masculine. The masculine must know what to do. But gosh, I feel really sad and depressed.
And I think that's why women are constantly looking for the man. Like it's this weird, like even women that are like, even the women that are like 45 or 50 and they haven't found a man, they feel absolutely like there's a huge hole. Like I know some of these women and they're just so about, where's my man? I need a man. And it's like, I wonder if that's, like that's almost like the other way, the other cultural side. Might be a whole nother show on this, to be honest.
I think it's a whole nother show.
Big topic. Yeah.
It's a big topic. And I think that it's a complex topic in that I think some of what you're hitting on is right, is like that feminine is looking for that masculine to rise up inside itself and to gift itself permission to have that. And simultaneously, if we look, I've been in the spiritual community for a long time. If we track back 20 years ago, what was the population in every yoga class? About 100
women.
98 to 100% women.
Yeah.
What was the population inside of most energy medicine classes, whether it was Reiki, craniosacral, whether it was any of the shamanic work, what women. So now we're starting to have more men to come to yoga classes and more men waking up on the planet because men haven't needed to. Women were suffering because they didn't have as much power. And so part of that craving for that masculine is that women woke up faster. And so it's like, no, I want an awakened man Could I have one of those, please?
That's a
And
great line. An awakened man. That's exactly what women want. That's really
right.
cool.
And so some of that is actually because there's been an imbalance in culture, and there hasn't been, women were just farther ahead on the curve. Not all, this is gross overgeneralizations, of course,
For sure.
but that's, part of that sense of where is he, is that longing and waiting for that part of culture to catch up. And so it's fascinating because this place of like, well, how do we set down this war? How do we come home? How do we as a culture, as a globe, come home from this war? Do you know how scary that is for every part of the empowered masculine inside of us that's been out of balance, but has been able to provide for our families, protect our families through those old socialized maps?
Yeah.
How hard is that to set down the guns when they work for us? How hard is it to
When
set
they
down our
work for
guns?
you, that's the thing, right? That's a fascinating thing. Like it works. Like
But it doesn't.
the shit that I get done, and it works, and my brain says this is how you do it, and then all of a sudden I get results. It's like there's a whole nother way. That's the scary part.
And that's what I believe is emerging on the planet, and what we need to have space for women to allow themselves to be nurturers, providers, and protectors, and to have men allow themselves to be nurturers, providers, and protectors, and for us to create collaborations and spiritual partnerships where we're helping each other evolve. But
That's it.
also, yeah. So, and it's a new game. It's no longer like chess where like winner takes all. I'm going to take all. It's not this dichotomy of my business wins at the expense of your business. That doesn't work anymore.
No, it's not even, that feels gross. Yeah.
But that was how it worked.
Yeah. Conquer and kill.
Because, yeah, we were out of balance with it. So I think that the example that you brought forth is a beautiful, literal, grounded example of what we're trying to figure out, and the map of how you did it. Like if you go back and look at that time period, that's really hard. It becomes like amorphous. It becomes very hard to put it into tangible steps of like, well, how did you actually transform during those 2 years where you weren't doing your YouTubes?
Yeah.
How did you actually recreate your marriage? And that's likely what you're offering and bringing the
100%.
gifts to every client you're working with.
100%. And it starts with the most intense honesty you can ever imagine. That's always where it starts, with honesty. Honesty with yourself, and then honesty with the relationships around you. That's literally if I had to sum it to something, I think that's the key. So, you know what, Sheryl, it has been wonderful to have you on the show. Enjoyed every second.
Thank you. Me too. It's been a pleasure to work with you on the show today and to get to know you better, and just to experience how you hold space for your listeners and for the people that you're bringing on to for me. So thank you.
Beautiful. Well, we'll wrap it up there. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, just wanted to tell you what I got out of this podcast when I was actually recording it. It was just like the energy sitting here recording with Sheryl is different than anyone I've ever had. I'm not the biggest woo-woo energy kind of guy. I'm pretty practical, but I know for a fact there's something to it. And I would recommend going to our YouTube channel. It's the From Within podcast. It's on YouTube. And just watch this one because she is really interesting to watch. She's got an energy about her that just brings peace. I don't know if it's exactly what we even talked about or it's just the energy that flows through her. Anyways, really interesting episode. I just have this love for her. It's just, I feel peaceful now and super happy I've had her on the show. Take a look at her stuff, guys. Honestly, if you're at all having kind of an unpeaceful heart, if you're having any kind of you want to work something out, you feel a little stuck, you wrestle with anxiety, or even anything, even big traumatic stuff for sure, but check her out, lean in, give her a call, do a session with her. I think you might find it actually, the results actually will speak for itself. And if you want, guys, I'd love to have you guys go to iTunes and give me a 5-star rating. If you want to do, you can give me a 4, 3, 2, 1-star rating. I don't care. Just rate it. Love to hear back from feedback. Get in touch with me on social media. I'm not that far off. If you're someone that is has a burning desire and you in your heart that you want to tell a story, there's something you want to share, give me a call. Maybe we'll do a show together. Maybe we'll just talk. Anyways, have an awesome day. Cheers.